Welcome to Conversations with Svend, the podcast where we explore the real, the raw, and the life-changing. Here, we dive into topics like dating and relating, conscious sexuality, money, prosperity, abundance, and wealth. We also explore nature's profound benefits for mental health and well-being through our deep dive nature talks and outdoor adventures. We host a dedicated Gene Keys conversations and guidance space where we uncover themes of genius, purpose, activation, karma, partnership, the Venus sequence, love, and the prosperity teachings of the Pearl. Today, we are visited by educator of financial freedom, James Coursier, someone who's dedicated his life to becoming financially free and who brings deep insight into how to identify, design, and live your ideal lifestyle. Together, we'll explore how to navigate the challenges of neurodiversity, how self-awareness can become a superpower, and how to live more aligned with our values in a world that can sometimes be a lot. Welcome to Conversations with Svend. Welcome to another episode of Conversations with Svend. I am Svend, and I think today is the 14th episode of my podcast. In the 6th episode, we introduced this wonderful gentleman, James Coursier, who is an absolute expert on everything to do with money, finance, abundance, and wealth, and also particularly of how to be financially free and identify, design, and live your ideal lifestyle. So if that resonates, please do stay with us because we are in for a riveting ride today. Welcome, James. Good to have you back.
It's great to be back. Always love a good conversation with you, Sven. Always takes some interesting turns. So yeah, very much looking forward to getting into it.
Where's this conversation going to flow? We need both the banks and we need the river, so we're flowing. Let's have a little recap of your story first. You are a passionate young man, James. What have you been up to since we spoke last in I think it was in spring, March, was it?
It was.
What have you been engaged with and what's going on?
Well, I'm currently living in Barcelona. I've been all over the place. So I spent the first kind of 6 months or so in Barcelona, and then I came back to London for the summer to see family and friends, and then I'm back here in Barcelona again. Returned about a month ago. I was in Portugal for a couple of weeks. I ran a retreat out there, which was incredible, and had a lot of friends that I was seeing out there. And now just really enjoying Barcelona and planning to stay here longer term. So really focusing on building community here and a home and a beautiful space here in Barcelona. I've been traveling a lot the last few years and have made the decision to kind of bed in and build stronger roots here. Because with freedom, it's amazing. You know, you can kind of live wherever you want, you can work when you want, do what you want. But the caution there is if you're not careful, you can kind of find yourself floating a bit. And so it's getting that right balance between that freedom to move and change and adventure while also having the roots and the anchor that comes with depth of location and relationships.
Yeah. So you have a base now in Barcelona.
Exactly.
Good. I'm just wondering, could you just recap on your journey, your financial journey? So let's begin with being in debt and then how it progressed and where you are now, kind
of. Yeah, it's a long story, but to kind of say it succinctly, essentially grew up very poor, amazing mother that brought me up. But money was tough and it was a struggle, it was a stress. And so under that environment, I kind of vowed I really didn't want that for my life moving forward. So I kind of worked very hard to make sense of this whole money game and solve it. Not because I was obsessed with money or like spending lots of money, but because I could see that it was a big obstacle for most people. And if I was able to remove that, it would be much easier for me to live a life more in line with how I want to ideally live. So that sent me on a whole journey. I first started with the whole standard societal view of what is success and achievement, which was good grades, good uni, good grad scheme job. But then I very quickly realized in that job that it was not for me. Did not enjoy the corporate life. And I looked at those senior than me and realized there's no way I wanted to do that. So I then began a bit of a journey of looking to pivot into something that was more aligned in terms of that brought me joy day to day, but also got me to a much stronger ultimate point and more quickly. Realized it was very difficult to actually get a reliable blueprint for that. It took me many years to try and work it out. A lot of people were saying things that were incorrect or out of date or in their interests, not mine. And I also needed to find something that suited me and like what I wanted rather than what someone else wanted. So I started with the more kind of standard, what we call FIRE in our industry, financial independence, retire early movement. It's quite puristic, quite kind of engineering, kind of almost nerd-based type of look at it. And went for kind of just saving and investing in the stock market and earning good money, but then realized actually that was going to take a long time and um wasn't exactly what I wanted. So I then ebbed and flowed, tried different things, but then ended up landing in sort of key things really that work for me. And really it just comes down to like three pillars: earn, save, and invest. So I from when I first started working, I was very strong on saving and having kind of financial discipline while still having a great life and and doing loads of stuff and going adventures and traveling, right? Um, so that when I started to earn more money, I was able to save far more money because most of that money then went into savings. And then from an earning point of view, I very quickly increased my income mainly by going freelance. So I moved into management consulting. I pivoted from another area within tax accounting, at my first job. But then I went and did management consulting independently, and that literally tripled my income. And then because I had such good financial discipline, that allowed me to save a really strong amount of money very quickly. And then I started investing in the stock market and then kind of got into property because I could see that there are a lot of fundamentals to property that just make it far more powerful if it's something you're into and you can kind of get on board with. And so, yeah, I mean, you can just basically make stronger returns more reliably. So the amount of money you can kind of draw off each month relative to how much wealth you've built up is much higher. And I could see that this was the way for me to retire a lot quicker. And I got in very simply, just with very basic property stuff, and then got really into it, and then increasingly got into more sophisticated ways of investing in property. Got brought in business partners, brought investors, because friends of mine were like, "Oh wow, like how have you retired from this? I've got money, but I don't know how to do this myself." So they kind of got involved, which allowed me to raise a lot of money and then improve things even more. So it's been a wild ride, and so now, yeah, now. My whole focus is on really trying to take very seriously how do I actually want to live my life? Like if there was no restrictions, what would that look like? Okay, great. Well, can I live that now? Okay, not fully, but mostly. So let me do that. And then any bits that I can't yet do, well, what's getting in the way? And to keep focusing on that. Because, like, for example, the the consulting work, I really enjoyed it. And it was chill, it was easy, it wasn't very hard. But the only reason I stopped it was because I was like, well, if they didn't pay me, would I do it still? No. So then I wouldn't be authentic with kind of the whole philosophy of how I'm trying to live if I kept going with it. So that's the thing I try and do. And I don't get it perfectly. I still do things I don't enjoy. But that's that's my North Star. Yeah.
Right,
I
right,
just
right.
went through a period of deciding I don't want to earn any money. For at least a year, I'm not making any active income
Mm.
to make sure that anything I'm doing is done because I actually enjoy it. There's no money incentive there.
Yeah, no, that's very wonderful. One of the guests I had on this podcast, Jem Ayers, she would say, if it's not a hell yeah, I'm not doing it. It's like I would love to just ask a few like clarifying questions because I'm on the spectrum of autism, neurodivergence, and I know you are also you shared in your
Mhm.
in the podcast conversation we had the sixth episode. If people want to recap, there was just a few things that you said. You said like traveling the world doesn't have to cost money, so you have a very practical and very savvy way of dealing with this. So could you clarify how you would do those kind of things, travel the world? A lot of people probably say, well, that costs money.
Yeah, so I'll preface this with look, the reality is the vast majority of things that bring you the enjoyment or the most enjoyment are either free or cost very little money, right? So even when you go out for dinner, it's not really the dinner usually that's giving you the enjoyment. It's it's the company you're with, right? And even the food, is it really the kind of fine dining element, or is it just that it's food that tastes nice? So so when you kind of get your head around that and that actually most of what brings you joy doesn't cost any money or very little. And even when it does cost money, really understanding like what's the level of joy I'm going to get from this versus how much money it's going to cost me, right? That really is at the source of being able to get maximum joy, fulfillment, and minimize restriction in your life while minimizing how much you spend, right? And most people who spend too much, it's usually either because they're avoiding money, they're just not even thinking about the decisions around money. They're just spending on things they just don't need, right? Or give very little satisfaction to them. Or they're just kind of almost like have some form of addiction around money or a, a predisposition to spend money as a way to feel good or okay. And invariably, like a lot of the decisions they're making that result in them spending money don't really give them that much joy. So just because it's a positive number doesn't mean it's worth it, right? There's many other things you could do that give you a much higher number on your time or your money investment, right? But if you're not thinking about it like that, that's when you get into problems. So the reason I say that first, because that's like the fundamentals. So when you take traveling, right, most of the joy that comes from traveling is being on an adventure, being in an environment with a different culture, different different just climate, yeah, meeting new people. All of those things, most of those things don't actually isn't the thing that costs the money. The money comes from the flight tickets, the accommodation, right? Having to maybe eat out because, you're not at home with the kitchen and everything. So then if you realize that or recognize that, then you go, okay, well, how do I get the things that I want that's actually going to give me the joy while making sure that the cost associated with that is minimized? One of the easiest ways is go to a cheap country, right? So, I did like 3 gap years. So I traveled for 2 years before university and 1 year after university. And this was before we got a proper job. I had no money. I look back and I'm like, I don't know how the hell I did that because I had basically no money. and that was for years, like, traveling constantly, like living, flying there, like, um, so it's ultimately just because I chose cheap places, and so I never went when I was younger to expensive places like Australia, Switzerland, or whatever. I spent most of the time in South America, Central America, East Asia. And then when you go there, when I was going there, I would just stay in hostels. It would cost like £2 a night to stay there. I would pay 30p for a meal, right? Like, well, and everything, all the things I did were just basically free. It was just like hanging out, grabbing a beer for not very much money, meeting some interesting person, doing free walk tours of the city and stuff. So like everything basically was free or cost very little, and back then flights were expensive. That was really the only thing that cost money. But once you were there, nothing. It's a lot harder to do that as you get older because you become a bit more set in your ways, which is why like traveling as young as possible is just so powerful because you can stay in a hostel for $2 a night and it'll be fine. It's chill. You're doing that
Mm.
in your 30s and 40s. You absolutely can. It's just more challenging. More, you have to put yourself outside your comfort zone more. But the philosophies are still true.
Yeah, no, thank you for clarifying that. That's very wonderful. I really appreciate that. Let's speak about your early life, James, and your challenges. Well, if I was to meet you now and I didn't know anything about your history, I think James, well spoken, well educated, well
Mhm.
mannered, obviously very handsome, good looking, successful. He must have been born with a trust fund. He has never had any problems in his life. That's my impression if I was just to meet you. So you mentioned neurodivergence, you mentioned challenges growing up. What were you faced with and how have you overcome those challenges?
Well, it's a very kind intro. I'm not sure I stand up to all of those compliments, but I'll receive them duly. Um, yeah, I mean, I do get this a lot. A lot of people just assume I come from money and, we went to private school and, that's where I am. But yeah, yeah, I've had a very difficult upbringing. Grew up in a single mother household, very poor. Father was not present, and for most of my life, I was neurodivergent, like yourself, and you know what that's like. So I just felt like I thought differently to other people, and so, I struggled sometimes to, to connect with other people, make sense of what was in my head compared to other people's. My mum was amazing, so she got us into really good schools. So I was surrounded by some people that were from better homes, but it was tough when you're turning up there and you're coming from a much poorer background because you don't fit in. So all of those kind of connections and navigating school was tough. I mean, it wasn't miserable, it was okay. But it was challenging, I was a late developer, when it came to learning because of my dyslexia. So it was late to read, speak, and all of those things. And again, I was called lazy and stupid a lot, even by teachers, who obviously meant well and just thought I was messing around. Had to self-learn and work out ways to teach myself because the education system didn't serve me. So there was a lot of like trying to work out ways to survive in what was a difficult upbringing, but then also, I guess, thrive under that environment. So I guess I'm fortunate that I had the fortitude and the personality traits to do that. Um, And I guess a lot of probably my drive today is through, I guess, having to go through those hardships and make sense of them and, the struggle that comes with that. So yeah, I mean, and then I also have health challenges. I went through a health crisis when I was 30. which meant I was basically in pain 24/7. I couldn't eat anything. I was off work for over a year, and I was like, no doctors could solve it, and I was like, shit, what do I do? How do I fix this? And I genuinely was like, I don't know whether I'm going to actually solve this. But the irony was that that was the wake up call I needed to really start actually like living my life how I wanted to live my life. And this whole, I was preaching this whole ideal life thing for a long time, but it was the classic, I'll just get to X, Y, and Z and then I'll do it. But when I was faced with the reality of like, well, I don't know how, maybe things don't change, and I don't know, maybe I don't live to a good old age. And so if I don't do it now, I'll never do it. And so that's when I started doing running workshops, coaching. I started producing content. I started really thinking about like what kind of difference do I want to make in this world, and how do I want to show up? How do I want to be remembered? And then so as my health started to improve over the years, um, I was left with, well, okay, like now I need to follow through on this. And I was presented after about a year, when the sick leave stopped, like, well, okay, do I go back to that job, or do I do something else? And I just was like, there's no way I could do that. I think I would have, it would have just worsened. I don't think my mind had just kind of moved too far beyond that. But it was really risky at the time because I was saying goodbye to all of the protection that comes with employment, sick leave, and all of that good stuff, to kind of pave a road of, independence and self-reliance when having been very unwell. So luckily it worked out for me, and it gave me more agency to, yeah, I guess create where I am now.
Hmm. Really powerful story. Um, yes, I suppose we're dispelling some of the assumptions of privilege that people might have when they just meet you like this. What about your neurodivergence and money habits? How does those kind of things correspond? One People from an outside view might think he's hyper focused. He's just
So this speaks to almost the previous thing you raised, this whole thing of like, oh, like, James just comes from money, or is well educated. That's why he is where he is, or oh, it's because he's neurodivergent and he's just got obsessed with this topic, therefore he's successful in this area. I'm not like that, so therefore it doesn't work for me. I mean, I think the reality, like I think I said this on your previous podcast. I say it all the time. My favorite quote is Marianne Williamson's, "Our deepest fear is not that we're inadequate, it is that we are powerful beyond measure." The reason it's my favorite quote is because deep down we know we have like huge potential, but we're just constantly finding reasons to kind of hide from that, and excuse the fact we're not where we want to be. And this is the main reason why there's this predisposition of human beings to find reasons. If someone sees someone who's successful in something they want to be successful in, oh, it's because of this. There's a justification as to why it's not in my life, right? Because if you don't have that, it's very confronting. It's like, oh, it's my responsibility, and that's not great to sit with. And so my view on this is we're all dealt a set of cards, right? In our hand. And my set of cards were pretty rubbish, let's be honest. But I had some good cards, and I made the most of them. And I accepted the cards that were not great in my hand and tried my best to make those cards not get in the way. It's almost getting me emotional thinking about this because it's true. Like, it doesn't serve me looking at someone else's hand a card and going, well, that's not fair. You got better cards than me, right? Like, that's not going to change my life. the only thing that's going to change my life is going, right, well, all right, like let's play the game. Let's play the best game, the best game we can with these cards, and yeah, like taking the neurodivergence fundamentally, and I see this time and time again. If you're neurodivergent, you think different to a neurotypical person. So you go through life in a system that serves a neurotypical person. So you're just constantly coming up to scenarios where it just doesn't work for you. It's like being left-handed in a right-handed world. So if you, and this doesn't happen with all neurodivergent people, some people really struggle their whole life, right? And I really empathize with that. But if you can be high functioning with it, which is what people often say, which is essentially where you can kind of see these challenges and you put in coping mechanisms to mean that one, these things don't get in the way of you living your life, but also you kind of work out, well, how do you succeed in spite, given that you think differently? And so the main strength you tend to see with neurodivergent people is they're really good at like understanding themselves, the situation, like, okay, like how do I, how do I get the best out of the situation, knowing how like my brain works, right? Because you've had to your whole life. Whereas neurotypical people don't, they just go through life, not really thinking too much. And so those the strengths that I've acquired from that have I then obviously leveraged those things to get success from. But my view on this is rather than going, well, I'm not that, rather think, what are my strengths and what are my weaknesses? How do I make the most of my strengths? And how do I ensure my weaknesses don't get in the way? It's one of the great things my mum did for me, when I was very young, when I was like obviously making sense of the fact that I thought differently, and I was pretty rubbish at certain things, really good at other things. It's the classic thing where she was like, James, you're special, you're different, right? You're really good at these things. You're not so good at those things, but like this is just who you are. And like other people are good and bad at other things. So so one, she kind of validated what was good in me and encouraged me to focus on that rather than things I struggled with, which is usually opposite of what people tend to receive in situations like I had. Because I focused on things I was good at, I was like, well, oh, well, like I'm really good, right? And I was spending time on the things I'm really good at, yeah. And so then I developed a much stronger sense of myself and stronger confidence. So one example was, even though my English was awful, but my maths was excellent, she got me a private maths tutor, not an English tutor. But because of that, I ended up getting really good at maths, getting really good grades, having a stronger sense of self, and then using that to push me through school. It also allowed me to I ended privately maths tutored when I was younger because I was like the best um, client, the best tutee, I don't know what you'd call it, the best client of my maths tutor, because everyone else was obviously doing it because they sucked at it. And so he was in the process of retiring. And so he was at all these people wanting to work with him and he just couldn't handle them. And he was like, hey James, why don't you just take them? Like you're really good. Like, oh, I don't have the energy for this. Why don't you take them? And so because of that, that allowed me to then go into then like teaching maths privately um, because of that consequence, right? Whereas obviously, if I'd have spent all my time studying English, then I would have just thought, oh, I'm just rubbish. I'm not very good, and obviously, it wouldn't have resulted in things like that. So just a small case of, I mean, in summary, what I'm essentially saying is, yeah, neurodivergence is tough because life is not an easy road. But if you're able to work through that and deal with the challenges, the skills and strengths you develop through that are so powerful that then if you leverage in whatever areas of your life can be a massive asset to you fundamentally. And a lot of this all just comes down to how you look at it, from what perspective you look at it. Do you see it as a strength or a weakness?
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, that's really powerful. Thank you for sharing that, James. I just wonder because you come across as very kind of disciplined and you have habits and consistency in what you do. So, what are your kind of systems for sticking to saving and investing, and what are some of the kind of behaviors that you have that have made the biggest difference in your life?
It's funny because I get this all the time. Like,
Right,
oh, I'm just so disciplined. I'm really not. I'm actually not disciplined. I'm very driven,
right.
which when I lock in on something, I'm very good at going after it and doing what's required. And then that results in a lot of action that is like kind of consistent in towards getting that, which then outwardly to other people looks as discipline. We're not actually disciplined. So, um, but I mean, it's changed over the years, right? So when I started, I kind of really nerded out on it and would like look at like how much money I made and what I was spending and how I was spending it and all the different areas and setting budgets and blah 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 blah, right? Because I knew that well, I was really into it, right? And I kind of knew that the more I understood it, then like the better I would do, right? But then, with a lot of things, as you master it and you come to understand it better, it becomes easier and simpler, and then you can do what is required in a more straightforward, simple way, in a more automated way. And then fast forward to now, I don't really do any kind of I never track my wealth, I never track my spending. Um, because I've just gotten to a certain stage of life where it's less important. I've done it for many years and it's kind of so built in that I kind of know, I know what's healthy spending and what's not. Right. I mean, my take for other people is having kind of gone through this journey is at the end of the day, the most important thing is that you're consistently tracking it. Right. And I did at least have setting kind of goals around it, at the very minimum, tracking it. And you can nerd out on it and you can spend hours every day looking at it and analyzing it. Great. Like if the more time you spend on something, the better you tend to do because you're just putting more energy there. But that should never be putting at risk you're doing it sustainably because there's no point spending 10 hours one week and then never looking at it again because it's the consistency that creates financial success. So that's why I'm a big fan of just making it as simple as physically possible. And the way to do that really is just like once a week or once a month, just right, how much did I spend in total? Yeah. Um, if you're setting a goal of how much to spend each month, like have I hit it or not? And if so, how much over or under? How am I tracking it on average? If you're looking at the single line items, again, just look at the things that are incurring the most, that's having the biggest impact, anything over £50, whatever. Um, and just be tracking that regularly. Because at the end of the day, to become financially free, it really just comes down to consistently earn strong money, consistently save that money or a strong portion of that money. You build up savings and then you take those savings and you invest it in a consistent way in a strong, reliable return. It's that simple. It really is, and the more you can play with the levers of those three areas, the quicker you're going to do it with the more money, with the more opportunities. And that really is it. It's just turning the dial on each of those three areas, right? And with the saving bit, with all of it, it's the consistency, right? Because if you save half of your money 1 month, but then you revert back to not saving anything for the rest of the month, that's far less effective than saving, say, 10% forever, right? Time and just like consistency is what wins this game fundamentally. Yeah. Unless you get a lovely inheritance. That always helps. Yeah.
Are you very patient then, James?
I would definitely win on the marshmallow game or marshmallow study if you've heard of that.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, yeah. So for most of my life, I was very future-minded, probably because my upbringing was difficult. So, I think where I took sanctuary was like, right, okay, if I can do something today that can make my life tomorrow better, great. That's a day well spent, right? Because my brain's like, obviously, this is not great, so let me improve this.
Right, right.
Let me develop the agency to be able to do that. So I'm very grateful that I'm not someone that looks in the past. I very rarely think about the past, or certainly like become preoccupied by the past. Um, I was very focused on the future, which is why so much of my actions was to create a better future, which I'm very grateful for. But it did get to the point where I was like, okay, like I need to be more in the present, right? Because as they say in lots of spiritual philosophies, right? Like there is only the present, right? That life is only the present. And so if you're only ever stuck in the future, well, tomorrow never comes. And so then you wake up one day and you realize you've never lived your life. So I have at times struggled with that. And I'm much more in the present now. I think that was a big part of me becoming or creating financial freedom, was to facilitate that.
I'm just wondering, I would like to go a little bit in the timeline. So from 34K in debt to financial freedom. So key stages, mistakes, milestone turning points, and also the scope of the projects from you began the projects and the scope of the projects you're involved in now. Could you, as the younger self, could you imagine that you one day would be doing what you're doing now?
Uh, no. Yeah, I think like basically like within financial literature, like, people always talk about this compounding curve, right? It's like a really big part of like learning the fundamentals of financial education. And so most people don't even like know what this is or really understand it. And those that do, even those, most people who've learned it don't really fully understand the power of it. And even for me, it was like I didn't really fully like believe it and understand it until I saw it in my life. The compounding curve is very simply like if you're making, say, if we take investing as an example, if you can make a 10% return, well, 10% of £100 is £10. It makes no impact to your life. 10% on £1,000 is £100. Okay, well, okay, like it's nice, but again, it's not really going to make some kind of impact. 10% of £10,000 is £1,000. Okay, well, like that's something meaningful. And then 10% of £100,000 is £10,000. It's like, whoa, that's a lot of money. 10% of £1,000,000 is £100,000, which you can live off. Same percentage, same strategy, completely different numbers. That is compounding. And each one of those stages is the same kind of, it's like an order of magnitude, but I don't know how to explain it. Basically, like over time, what happens basically, if you're consistent with earning, with saving, with investing, and especially putting effort into things, they compound. And so you get this kind of curve like this. And the thing with the compounding curve is at the beginning, not much happens. So you're putting all this effort in and not much changes. So you're like, well, what's the point? I might as well just live my life, be in the present. But the thing is, you have to get through this period. And then all of a sudden it starts to tick up and and then you start to see progress and it starts to feel meaningful, right? But then once you push past that, you get into the kind of straight line up where like all of a sudden, very quickly, like the number just goes up really quickly. So it's like three stages. The first stage feels like nothing's happening. Second stage is like, okay, like this is what I was wanting. This is what I can kind of connect with and like feels realistic. And then the third stage feels quite hard to imagine until you get there. It feels theoretical. And I saw that in my life. So yeah, I mean, look, I was never someone that was financially poor in how I managed my money. The reason I started with 34,000 in debt was because I came out of university with all this debt, right? You know, starting with zero, but having all of this debt. Um, Side note, I wouldn't go back into university again. I don't know whether we talked about that last time. Um, I'm not saying you shouldn't go to university, but I'm not convinced it was worth it, and certainly not now with the costs they are now. So yeah, it started with all of this debt from university, and then I focused on just, I mean, like I said, I got a grad job and got paid £28,000 a year. You know, it wasn't very much. Certainly, you know, not for where I wanted to go. Um, but when I worked that one job I ever did, I kind of knew that was just a stepping stone, you know. Ultimately, to make a lot of money, you have to think, what is a path to get me to something that will make me a lot of money? Rather than thinking, what's the next step to me making more money, right? So me going and working a job and earning like 28 grand and then, you know, making like 40 grand or whatever, you know, wasn't enough for me to allow me to get the kind of savings that would make me make a lot of money very quickly. But it did build the skills and experience to allow me to go freelance, that allowed me to make a lot more money. So, I mean, I don't know how much detail you want me to go into, but essentially I worked 9 years. That's it. I did 5 years as an employee and 4 years freelancing. And most of the money I made was in the 4 years freelancing because of this compounding thing, right? So, I mean, do you want me to drill into anything else? I mean, that was the kind of income journey in terms of the savings journey. My philosophy was always let the dog wag the tail, not the tail wag the dog. So what I mean by that is my spending was always way less than my earnings because I never wanted my spending to materially impact my financial position. So when my income would go up or my wealth would go up, yes, I'm allowed to spend more, but a fraction less. So I can still go up, but you very quickly get used to a higher cost of living. Um, or a certain amount of money you're spending. You know, it feels good temporarily, but very quickly it just feels normal. And then it's very hard to go the other way. You know, so yes, I spend more now per month than I did when I was younger, but you know, I was pretty good at having that financial discipline. From an investing point of view, we talked about it. You know, it started with the stock market and gold and commodities and diversified portfolio, but then realized that if I wanted to do this quickly, because that's what I wanted, right? To do this as quickly as possible, I wanted something that would give me a stronger return more reliably, because I didn't want to risk like, oh, like the next 5 years doesn't work out quite well, and I've got to wait another 5 years. And also, the more reliable a return is from your investment, the more you can take out of the expected return because it's not so up and down. So with the stock market, because the returns vary so much, the amount you can take out safely compared to your expected return is much lower. Because if for whatever reason you retire and you stop working and you go through some bad years before you go to good years, you can run out of money. Yeah. But saying all this, everyone wants to hear my story, and of course it's interesting because it's real, it's real, it's tangible, it's real, you can put your hands around it. But I always say like every person is different. They want different, you don't want my life, I can assure you, right? Warren Buffett is a great example. People look at Warren Buffett, oh my God, this guy's so amazing, he's such an amazing investor, he's got all this money. The vast majority of people would not want Warren Buffett's life. He has a really boring life. He's lived in the same home the whole time. He eats really modest, he eats the same foods, he never goes out, right? It's one of the reasons why he's so bloody rich, right? But you don't want that life. So you don't want my life. So it's like, it's good to hear a story to be inspired and see how it, like someone's done it in practice. But it's much better to understand the fundamentals and think, what do I ultimately want? How does my money need to be set up to facilitate me living that life? And what's a plan that will get me there, right? Because you might hear my story, oh, I can't freelance in what I do, so what James is talking about is pointless, which if you take that would be a terrible way of thinking about it. Or,
Right, right.
oh, I could never make that money, or I don't, so there's so many different strategies that one can take.
Yeah. Well, in my life, I met a gentleman called Stanley Rosenberg who was teaching accessing the healing powers to the vagus nerve and body work. And one of the things I got from him when I was studying massage, he said, "You learn techniques to understand principles. Once you understand techniques, once you understand principles, you can develop your own techniques." So I think what you're talking about is like it is kind of know thyself, isn't it? Investment advice is personal advice. It's, you need to know yourself to be able to.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, and it can be annoying sometimes because I remember getting into this problem where I'm like, I'm trying to learn, like, how do I solve this money game, right? And then I'm reading on this stuff and I'm like, yeah, it sounds great and it sounds interesting, but I'm like, yeah, but how do you do this? Like, these are just bloody principles, right? It's like, just tell me what to do, right? Like, people just want to know, like, what do you do? So I've always tried as best I can to be much more clear on like this is actually what you need to do.
Right,
Some of the things it took me years to like when people were like, oh yeah, invest in the stock market, invest in gold and do these things like right, but like no one tells you how do you actually do that. Like it's actually quite difficult. I mean, it's gotten a lot easier. And then you go to buy it and there's all of these weird names and things, and you're like, I don't even know what I'm buying. It's like, is this even what I think it is? So that is I think that's important to be mindful. Um, the, the the but the bit I just caution with is like, yeah, fine, like start with something like so you could go, okay, well, like James did that. Okay, well, let me start with that maybe as like a base and see like, well, is that going to get me like what I want and got James what he wanted? Is that going to get me what I want? And then, well, look at his strategies. Like, realistically, can I or do I want to do things he did? Yes or no? And if it's yes, great, then do what I did. If no, okay, great. Well, like, what are my other options? What else can I do? And just build from there. And as you come to understand it better, like more options will come available to you.
right, right. Let's talk a little bit about this journey of going freelance. Is that the same as becoming self-employed and then also increasing that earning ability? How do people who are in this situation, they got a steady job, they got going, 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 is like, how do you overcome those fears and blocks that maybe, and what is your guidance for people who might be in this situation? I really don't enjoy it, but it brings in the money, and to kind of go freelance or do what you actually want to do. The relationship between freedom and fear, I suppose.
I'm glad you touched on this because it's probably like the lowest hanging fruit to get the most impact for most people, not everyone. And the reason is because when you go freelance, like what someone is willing to pay you is way higher for literally the same work as what you're doing as an employee.
Right.
And the reason for that is because when you hire someone as an employee, it comes with a load of hassle, right? Um, you've got like it's harder to fire someone. It's there's all like you've got to train them. It's harder to be flexible with when you need the work. Like, am I going to need this work for long term? You've got HR, like all of this stuff. It's like a whole headache. Whereas if you just hire someone as a contractor or freelance or someone self, whatever word you want to use, but basically like you're paying them to do a job, right? Without employing them fundamentally.
Mm.
It means all you need to think about is like, well, what do I want? Okay. And then let me find someone who can just deliver me that. Yeah. And so the money you're willing to pay is directly related to the value that person is providing.
Yeah.
Because if they're not providing that value, you just get rid of them. So that's why you get more money. It's kind of, and also if you do it in certain ways, so if they're temporary projects, if you have multiple clients, you pay a lot less tax as well, right? Because you're operating as a business. You can set it up through a company, and certainly in the UK, the tax is much better if you work as a business because the UK recognizes that as you kind of investing in the economy, so to speak, rather than being an employee. That's a whole topic for another day, but there is an opportunity to get a tax benefit as well. But even without that, people are willing to pay you more. So the main things people say as objections here, what my view on this is, if you reframe this or you do it in the right way, they become advantages. So one, people say, oh, well, you don't have job security. Okay, you can argue that. Like if you work for the government, like it's pretty hard to get rid of you. But then they pay you poorly because it's the government. And that's one of the reasons why, because they can't get rid of anyone. So in a normal private job, yeah, it's going to be harder for them to get rid of you. But ultimately, if you consistently under-deliver and the value you're providing is lower than what you're making, they'll get rid of you at some point, or the economy changes. So it's not completely safe. When you're a freelancer, you are constantly thinking, is the value I'm providing today, right now, more than what they're paying me? Because if not, they're just going to get rid of me. So this constant thinking about that results in you adding way more value to the person you're working for, which results in you being much more sticky in terms of that job, right? And you end up getting paid more because you're constantly focusing on value rather than time. So I only ever had one freelance client for like 4 years. Why? Because I was sticky because they were like, why would we get rid of this guy? Like he's providing loads of value. So, I never had an issue, but that's because I talked about it like that. Second one is, oh yeah, but then you get stuck, you plateau because there's no training and development. Yeah, if you just sit there and you just do what they ask you, but actually you have way more training and development opportunities. Because if you work for a company, you rely on their processes or whether they want to train you and whether they want to pay the money, right? And it's all like a machine and you're like a little cog. When you work freelance, right, you could be doing a job, right? And let's say, you're a consultant and you're doing your project manager or whatever, and you wanna start like moving more into IT and like expand your experience. All you have to do is just be like, hey, I've just noticed like you've got all this stuff going on here in IT. Like, do you want me to help you out? Like, you don't have to pay me more, I'll just help you. Like, you know. They were like, yeah, of course, yeah, to help out. Like, it's so much more flexible. So you just find opportunities, start helping, start learning, start using that as a way to improve your skills and experience. And then before you know it, you're adding more value, and then you can ask for more money. So you just, and you don't have, it's so much time wasted as an employee with office politics, with going for promotions and business development, practice development. You don't have to worry about any of that in your
Mm.
freelance work. So all of your time is just spent adding value.
Yeah.
So it's much easier to add value, right? Um, yeah, I mean, I'll stop there. I could go on for hours. Yeah, so in the last thing is like, oh, but then like, what if, I lose my job and then, and then can't find another job, and then, then I've not got money coming in, and then I'm gonna, get into a really financially difficult place, right? Right, but you're making more money as a freelancer. So if you have the financial discipline to then take that additional money that you're making and save that, the opposite is true. You can take 3 months off, take 6 months off if you want. You've got a period of time, there's no work, great. Go enjoy it. Go spend that extra money. And
Mm.
then when another job comes available, go again. So you've actually got way more flexibility and freedom there than someone who's an employee where they're earning less and it's paycheck to paycheck. Because if they lose their job, right, and they're not saving or they have that same ability to save, they're way more susceptible to financial impact to losing that job.
Mm. Yeah, so for me, when I'm listening, it sounds like know yourself and know your worth, know your value, kind of is quite important. Like,
Yeah, like the best way to make more money, earn more money, is to think let's be honest, James, like how much value am I adding here? Right? Like, is it high? Is it low? Okay, what can I do to add more value where I am working?
yeah.
If you add more value, you will get paid more money. And if they don't want to pay you any more money, you can just go find another job that will pay you more money because you're adding more value. It's the same way where two people with the same abilities are delivering the same value. It's not just the value you're able to make, but it's also the value you're adding to someone. So it's why two companies in two different industries, one will pay way more money than another one for the same person, because within that industry, within that company, you providing that value is worth more money. So you always got to think about it like what I'm doing for this person or this company, how much like value, how much money is it making this person, how much value is it giving this person, and how do I increase that?
Mm.
Or how do I increase it by moving to another company or doing it myself? Because offering that work directly is providing more value because there are lower costs associated for that person for receiving that value, if you follow.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I do. And let's talk about designing and living your ideal lifestyle. It's your great passion, James. And so, how do you structure your life now? And how can others identify, design, and live their lifestyle according to their values and their desires?
Yeah, it always comes back to this. And, some people are, whatever, like, oh, it sounds a bit woolly or a bit personal development-y or whatever. But, like, at the end of the day, for the vast majority of people, like, what do they want from life? They want to live their ideal life. They want to get the most out of life, whatever that is for them, and it changes person to person. So my whole philosophy is start with the end in mind. Think what is that ideal version, and then work backwards from there and think, well, what do I want to be doing today, this week, this month, to facilitate me living that life right now as much as possible, and in the future more so. So I'm these different ways I do it. The most common one I kind of take people through is Like the biggest pushback I get is, oh, will it change? And how do I know what I want? Yeah, you don't know. Like you don't know until you try, or it can change, right? One day you may not want kids, another day you do. One day you might want to live in Thailand, on a beach. Another day you'll actually know live somewhere a bit more sensible. Um, that's okay. It's going to change. But if you don't put a stick in the ground, then you've got nothing to work towards. Right? So the best way to do it is like the way I try to do it is put an imaginary gun to someone's head and I say, right, if you don't pick something right now in terms of what you ideally want from life, that's it, you're dead. You've got to pick. And whatever you pick, that's the life you've got to live. And the reason why that's powerful is it forces the mind to just go with its gut and just commit to something. What feels most right now in this moment. And then from that perspective, go through your ideal day in minutiae. When are you waking up? Where are you waking up? Who's next to you? Where in the world are you? What does the room look like? You look outside. What does outside look like? What's the first thing you do in the morning? What's the second thing you do in the morning? What's the third thing you do in the morning? How long do each thing of these things take? And you're just building out that ideal day in as much detail and be as specific as possible, right? And this then gives you the foundation of like that standard typical day that you ideally want to live, right? Once you've done that, you go for it. Yeah, is that everything? Yeah, okay, great. And then you think, is there anything that's not in that day that is part of my ideal life that might happen more irregularly, once a week, once a month, whatever. These days might change. And you go through a process of just adding that, and you just keep going until you look at it all and you think, is that everything? Like, if I lived that life, would that be my ideal life? Would that be everything I want? Once you've done that, you then go through a process of going through every single bit of that, and you ask yourself, am I doing that right now? Okay. If not, can you hear that in the background? No, okay, great. If I'm not living it right now, can I do it right now? If it's a yes, brilliant. Start doing that right now and live more in alignment with how you want to live your life, right? Sometimes it just takes waking up to that and going, oh, actually, yeah, like I'd much rather do that than what I'm currently doing. If you can't, well, there'll be a reason, there'll be something getting in the way. So you pull together all of the reasons as to why there's certain things you can't do as you go through the whole list. And then you'll have a big list of things that are getting in the way. And they usually fall into two or three categories, one of which is invariably money, right? But sometimes it might be relationships or skills or experiences, right? Um, and then you're clear on like, well, okay, like what is it that I want to be doing in each of these areas to remove more and more of these obstacles for me to live my ideal life. And this is essentially what I did in my life. And it's what I help other people do and what I talk about a lot, because if you don't think about it in this way, you'll wake up one day and realize you've lived your life and it hasn't been what you wanted. It was another person's life, or it was a fragment of that, right? And maybe you go through this process and you don't end up quite exactly in your ideal life, but it's going to be a lot closer. There's definitely aspects to my life right now that is not quite what I would like, but it's certainly a lot closer than it was in the past, right?
Mhm.
I still have to do annoying admin stuff and deal with annoying people and, make mistakes, right? But ultimately, I've chosen to live in Barcelona, right? I work when I want, where I want, I live where I want. I spend money on what I want when I want it. Yes, I make decisions, am I fully can just buy my own jumbo jet? No, but the point is it's just constantly thinking like, is this how I really want to live my, is this how I really want to live my life? And if not, like, what's getting in the way? How do I move close to that? How do I move close to that? So you get those categories and then you use those to orient your main goals in life. So if one is money, it's like, okay, well, like, how much money do I need coming in per month, for example, to live this ideal life? I want to live in Sicily, but I'm living in Hull right now. Okay, so for me to go live in Sicily right now, well, I need enough money to make the transition. I'd either need to stop work so then I can just go live there, or how will I do that? Or I need to be able to move my job into such a way where I can do it remotely, or I would need to position myself in such a way where I could get a job in Sicily, right? So as an example, yeah. I mean, the reason why I'm a big proponent of just financial freedom is because it just kind of, it's a very, it's a much simpler way of solving the money game, right? Because your income is passive, therefore you can then focus on other things. But it's not the only way. Does that make sense? Do you want me to drill into any of that?
It makes sense, but I have got a little bit of a neurodivergent list. So I'm hoping I can invite you back and we can go a little bit deeper into things.
Of
I want to
course.
talk about money and emotions and relating, and I want to show how money. I want to talk about how money shows up in relationship, uh, and I want to talk about Shelley J. Whitehead, who's my dating and relationship coach, because I use a lot of her principles that she taught me in how I relate with life, and within that is relating with money as well. Money is an energy in everybody's life, and it shows up in relating and relationships, etc., etc. And I want to talk a little bit about pricing and charging in a grounded way. So even when you use such a word as charge, like how much do you charge? There's an emotional charge around that, you know. But let's talk about money and relating, and let's talk about relationship with money. And this is a very abstract, open ended kind of question. But
It
how
is, but like there's a lot to it, but at the fundamental level, there isn't much to really understand. Like ultimately, I mean, when I was coaching for many years, right, in financial space, I would often work with couples, and couples stuff would come up. You know, it's a common issue. In fact, it's one of the biggest reasons why relationships end. Certainly, marriages, divorce. In the US, it's the number one reason. Yeah. So, number one, you need to be compatible financially. So, ultimately, to have a successful relationship, you've got to want things that are compatible, want and need things that are compatible with someone else, right? It's like what what do each of you want from life, and do they complement each other? And with money, it's one of those areas, right? So like if one person wants to spend very little money and live somewhere very cheaply, and the other person wants to have an extravagant lifestyle, right? Well, that's not going to work, okay? Unless one person is willing to change what they want to be more in alignment with the other person. So just like, you know, a lot of relationship advice is like understanding the other person, what do they want? And yeah, you might love them and there might be a lot of chemistry there, but have you gone through how you want to live your life in all areas, including money, and kind of gone, yeah, like do we want the same thing? You know, or are we going to wake up in 10 years when we've got kids and realize like we're just on different pages? The second thing is like other areas, if you have serious issues or trauma or difficulties in an area, it's going to show up in your relationship, right? And it's going to take a huge amount of energy from the relationship. And it's no different with money, right? So if you are a compulsive spender, or you have huge debts, or you know you're avoiding money and you're getting into really difficult money situations, right? That's going to cause a huge amount of stress in the relationship. Because, you know, for example, you know, you come together, you marry, you right, and then like one person is going out, they're making money, they're creating financial solvency for the relationship, and then the other person has some form of like addiction around money. has really poor behaviors around money, right? Which is causing a huge impact to the relationship themselves, but also the other person. It's going to cause major problems, right? And so again, it's like, again, when you're looking to be in a relationship with someone, you really need to understand like what are their values around money, how, what's their capabilities in this area, and like, am I willing to take that on, right? Because you ultimately will, right, as that relationship develops. And so, like, are they doing well in this area? And if they're not, do they have a growth mindset? Are they doing better in it? Or is it going to become a serious problem in the future? It's really these two main things that you need to understand around money and relationships to make sure that it's not a problem for you moving forward. I mean, there's things I can talk about to make it a success, obviously, but they're the two caution areas.
Yeah. Well, we're setting the scene a little bit here, James. Yes. Uh,
Yeah.
but it's like investing, isn't it? If you invest in somebody, you want to make sure that there's a compatibility in kind of the areas. Otherwise, it's not going to work out, isn't it?
Yeah, recognizing we're all human, that they don't need to be perfect in every area, but like, are you willing to sign up to who this person is right now,
Mm. Yeah,
in
yeah,
every area, including money?
yeah. All right, now it's coming to the vulnerable, authentic and vulnerable part, which is my own kind of story and
Yeah.
relationship with money. So basically, uh, through talking to you, my feeling is that you, James, have learned how to feel rich from practicing restraint and not spending money. And my nervous system, my ADHD brain is like whenever I have money, I have this compulsive urge to spend, and when I spend, I used to use this kind of, but actually, I don't know if I want to relapse into some of my previous kind of characters, but I used to like spending time and spending money kind of thing. Uh, I am just like very compulsive with money, and I don't think there would be a number. If I have it, I would want to spend it basically. I find saving any kind of restraint in those areas quite difficult. I do have some good news. I am going to train to become a Gene Keys guide, and one of those is actually about prosperity, one of those sequences. There is three sequences in the Gene Keys, and the first one is purpose, the activation sequence, finding your purpose, your passion. The second one is the Venus, which is about love, partnership, romance, and the third one is the Pearl, which is about prosperity and the flow of prosperity in one's life, etc. And actually, initiating this podcast has been a part of this. Um, I wanted to ask you about this, yeah, about this charging. Like, how do you, or anybody listening to this, how do they find their right kind of fee or price that they want to charge for their services, so to speak?
Well, it's kind of two, I mean, the bit you were talking about before, which I think I just want to quickly address, is like, I'm just like compulsively spending money, right? Look, we all, our brain is just trying to survive and like move towards pleasure and away from pain. And we all have needs, and our brain just gets used to certain ways of meeting those needs, right? And sometimes they get stuck on healthy ways of meeting those needs, and other times it gets stuck on unhealthy ways of meeting those needs. Once your brain's got locked in on a kind of a consistent way of meeting a need, it's like a habit, it's very hard to change those, right? But they can be changed. The brain is neuroplastic. It's just very slow to change that. So I think the first thing is you just need to recognize one, like it's hard to change these things, but it can be changed. Yeah. And and then understand better human psychology and what's required to make these types of changes. So, as an example, when you're seeing poor behavior in oneself, it's because it's not doing it to just destroy you with no reason. There's a reason it's doing it, right? So understand what need is being met by that behavior, and you must find a replacement. So if you're going to stop spending compulsively to meet that need, or whatever that need is, whether it's like, self-soothing or pleasure when I'm just feeling uncomfortable, negative or whatever that is, it's like, well, I need to find an alternative way of then meeting that need so it can be replaced. Because if you don't, what will happen is you stop that behavior, the need becomes unmet, that builds and builds and builds, and the power of the brain to meet those needs is so strong you cannot fight it. It will just get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger until no matter how much discipline you have or willpower, right, you'll just break it, which is often why people kind of revert back. So I think that's important to bear in mind. And patience and being gentle on oneself and understanding that it takes time, right? But then being consistent with that progress. And things that make a big difference in our life, even if we're only making small improvements, will still have an enormous impact on our life. Yeah. So if something is a real problem, okay, yeah, we might not go, immediately to what we want, but at least we're going from 0 to 1, from 1 to 2, we're making these baby steps. And these baby steps will just kind of move us slightly more in that direction of what we want. Yeah. And being grateful for that on the way, rather than getting frustrated it's not exactly what we want and then regressing. So I think I wanted to just talk to that briefly. In terms of charging, emotional charge, it kind of made me smile a bit because like I don't have emotional charge here, which is why it's easier for me. Money is a very powerful topic, it's powerful. So because it's powerful, it just feels more emotional. It has a bigger gravity, in investing. People, when they trade, for example, successful investors are able to detach emotionally from money. So the more emotionally you're attached you are to money, the more you're going to be at the whim of the psychology of money. And a lot of the psychologies around money don't serve us because our brain was not built for a monetary economy. It was built for hunter-gatherer lifestyles where money didn't exist, or not in the form it is right now, right? So, we're using a brain that wasn't built for how we're living, right? How do you charge? You need to just like take a step back and like don't see it for more or less than it is, and just be honest with yourself. Like what? Okay, right. The best way I can answer this is to think like, what do I want here, right? So so for example, I guess you've got a business, and within this business, you provide services, and then you're charging for those services, right? Yeah. Is that right?
Well, I'll be doing readings and like taking
We-
people through their like hologenetic profile, which is like an astrological chart kind of thing.
Great. So you're building a practice and you're offering specific services, and then you've got to be like, well, God, what do I charge for this, right? At the end of the day, you've got to think, well, what do I want? Well, I ultimately, you could just say, well, I just want to make as much money as possible, but it isn't quite straightforward as that. So, oh, yeah, well, I want to make more money or as much money as possible while respecting certain things. I want to be doing work that I enjoy, working with people I respect, etc., etc. So based on that, like how do I think I'm going to get there? Yeah. Well, I've obviously got to like build up experience. I've got to like market it my practice. I've got to build up demand for this and so on and so on. Yeah. So there's like various things that need to be worked on. But ultimately, to provide a service to someone and then be willing to pay you money for it, certain things need to be in place. They need to believe that the value you're going to provide them in exchange for the money they're going to pay you is higher than the value that they put to the money they're giving you fundamentally. If they feel the value they're going to get from you is more than the value they're going to lose by giving you that money, they'll pay you the money, right? How do you do that? Well, this is more actually about perceived value rather than real value, especially when you're starting a business. Well, how do you build up perceived value? Well, it's like influence. So it's like building yourself up as an expert and as an authority. This is why people put content out online because that person can see that and go, oh, okay, like this person's really good. Well, this is testimonials. You have maybe free consultations with these people when they build up an increasing level of perceived value towards you and confidence that their perception of that value is correct. Because when someone pays you, well, like there's no guarantee they're going to get the value that they think they're going to get. So people who make a lot of money in business are able to provide a strong confidence rating to prospective buyers that what they're going to buy is going to give them high value. When they assess the value, perceived value, it's a higher amount of value, right? And in something they want, right? And then there's like a process that makes that kind of simple, right? Like moving through it. Now, I mean, I'm going in a quite a big way around what you're asking because that's the answer. It's not how do I work out how much what price do I put? Because it's like it's just such a small bit of
Yeah.
what needs to be established, right? But ultimately, you charge what someone is willing to pay,
Yeah.
right?
Simple.
And you can do things that increase or decrease what someone is willing to pay fundamentally, which is why sales and marketing is the most important area of business,
Yeah.
more important than the product itself.
Yeah, definitely.
Because at the end of the day, if you can't sell your product, you've got no business. Doesn't
Mm.
matter how good your product is.
No. Mm.
Um, Last thing I would say is my approach has always been when you start a business, you want to remove as much friction as possible. And one of the frictions is obviously money. So, for example, when I started my coaching practice, I very quickly, within 6 months, started charging from like even thinking about it. And I did that because I literally just started coaching for free, as if I was getting paid
Right.
a huge amount of money. And what that allowed me to do is very quickly build up confidence myself that what I was doing was working and then being able to tweak and change what I was doing until I was like, okay, like, yeah, okay, now I know what I'm doing. But also I very quickly built up testimonials and feedback and a network of people that had gotten value from me that would then be able to refer people on. So then I very quickly started charging a lot more money than people would take years to get to that amount of money if they charged from the beginning. So I'm not saying everyone should necessarily do this, but it's just like I think a better way of thinking about it,
Mm.
which is what's the quickest, most effective route to other people viewing me as being able to provide an enormous amount of value to them,
Hmm.
um, so that they're willing to pay me that money. Because and then if you can then follow through on that, and then that becomes true, well, it's just going to grow and grow and grow and grow.
That is, yeah, I love the way you're kind of thinking about things because, like, you got to think of the whole thing, isn't it? You can't just go a little bit of, you got to have the whole, and you do show the bigger picture many times in how you speak, etc., etc. Let's talk about from you began and now your current projects and the scale of what you're involved in now. I think it'll be very interesting, and then tell people how to find you if they want to learn some of these things you're doing or whatever you're sharing at the moment in your, but what are you involved with? What are the scale of it? Does it frighten you at times? Is it?
Yeah, it has. It evolves. You know what? Now I've actually taken the decision to stop making any active income purposefully so that I can really focus on things that really bring me joy primarily without money being involved at all. So I completely stopped the coaching. I'm exploring things at the moment. I'm learning what I want, what the next chapter is going to be. A big part of my focus is building community and building the ideal home and life environment, which is why I recently moved back to Barcelona and I've invested hugely in the community here because that really, for me, the more I come to understand life and certainly my own life is that's really what brings the most joy. It's community. It's having the right people around you that you feel aligned with, that you feel connected with, and you do great things together. And if you get that right, it's the most effective way to have a great life. So community, environment, in terms, I'm doing various kind of workshops and talks and things, here in Barcelona, I did one in Lisbon, and other places. I'm more on this pathless path. So I'm more explorative. So if things come up and I'm like, yeah, I'd be up for doing that. I'll do that. If I enjoyed it, I'll do more of it. If I don't, I don't. If you want to kind of follow me and stay abreast of what I'm doing, I'm most active on Instagram, which is james.ukl. So it's james.ukl. I've got a load of content out there on all the platforms, um, LinkedIn, YouTube, whatever, Spotify. If you want to kind of learn more about what I do or like how I think and the way I look at the world. Um, and then I guess, yeah, I also run retreats. So I just ran one in Portugal about a month ago, which was amazing. And just having fun with it, really. That's my main philosophy at the moment. Just try not to take things too seriously and um, yeah, make sure I'm constantly checking in with is what I'm doing actually bringing meaning to my life.
Tell us about the property development you're involved in at the moment.
Oh yes, yeah, yeah. So I never thought I would get into the level of property I am now in. Geez, it first started as just like a really simple vanilla thing with property, really basic new properties in city centres, and then I just got more interested in it, more experienced at it. Moved into refurbs and below market value and HMOs and whatever. And then a couple of recent deals we did. One, we bought a house, a building for 1.7 million pounds. There was 7 flats in it. All student HMO. And we also uh, did a development. So we bought a building that was commercial, disused, hadn't been used for years. Parts of it was decaying. We got planning to convert the commercial building into 4 flats, demolish the section that was, falling apart, and then build a coach house to the rear. So we got planning. We're working through the process of getting someone to build this thing. It's all basically in place. It just needs building. But I think the key thing I've really had to master over the years, because this is really the only project I'm now doing, is to set things up so my input is very little. So I'm just making the decisions. So I have an architect that's managing it from a design point of view. I've got another architect that's managing it from an operational day-to-day place. obviously having a developer do the development. And so minimizing that time input on my end, albeit that sometimes is not always easy, you know. But yeah, God, when I first started this, if someone said to me, you'd be doing property deals, in the millions with multiple flats and you're dealing with planning and extensively for, hundreds of thousands of pounds. I mean, the build itself will be over £1 million. Just those numbers just still seem crazy to me. Less crazy, but incomprehensible when I first started. And again, it goes back to this power of compounding. If you just keep at something, you keep getting better at it, the numbers just get bigger. And it's just a part of moving from one step to the next to the next. And before you know it, you're doing more exciting things.
It does sound very exciting, I will say. Um, I myself, I've got some interesting episodes coming up. My next, which I'm recording, is with my lovely Caitlin, and then some of her friends, Lucy Davis, who's a graduate in adventure filmmaking, and then Duff Mills, who had quite an extraordinary healing journey with nature. And we're going to record a surf podcast with the kind of metaphor: you cannot control the waves, but you can learn how to surf. And I've also been working on an awards for all application with a multitude of people. So I had good news that it'll be put in. And then, of course, I'm also recording another Gene Keys episode. I would love to invite you back as our money expert in this podcast in time as it goes. I hope I can still that you still find it interesting coming on this podcast. Yes. And then I have this idea. I want to introduce you to Shelley, who's been on my podcast, and we want to talk about dating and relating and money and how money shows up in relationship and go into that in detail. That's my little kind of plan. There's something I'd like to ask you about, which we've so when it comes to money, everybody wants it in some one way or another. And sometimes people want it in maybe not in total integrity, maybe somewhat in devious ways, etc., etc. And that could be an episode for a podcast. But when it comes to discernment, so some of the people that I've come across that I admired, and then I kind of looked a little bit deeper, I found out that there's kind of some darker side to personal development. You've spoken to that in podcasts previously, etc., etc. But how can people discern when they meet somebody in this marketplace and they go, "Ooh, do this, do that, and you'll be rich," like get rich quick, all these kind of. How do people discern who to trust and who not to trust?
So it's really, really important. And I went through this whole process myself. It took me a long time to find someone that actually knew what to do and that I could believe them. And really, this all comes down to how believable someone is. Believability is made up of two things: trust and respect. Do you trust them? So trust comes down to they may know what they're talking about, okay? But do they have your best interests at heart or theirs or someone else's, right? So often, if someone is trying to sell you something, well, there's a pre-assumption that, well, you kind of get your interest at heart, not mine, right? So you just want to sell me it. You just want my money. Yeah. So always got to ask yourself, like, what's in it for you? Like, why are you doing this? Why are you telling me this? Yeah. Because if you can answer that confidently, and the answer is because you genuinely want to help me, you genuinely want to be in a better place, well, then I can trust you, right? Yeah, because you're putting my needs ahead of anyone else's, or at the very least in alignment with anyone else's. The second one is respect. Okay, yeah, I might trust you, You might have my best interests at heart, but do you know what you're talking about? And it's kind of two main things there, really, which is like, have you done it yourself? Do you have a proven track record of having achieved it? That's a minimum. And then ideally, a proven track record of helping other people in this thing. And then they've got success. One is a non-negotiable in my mind because theory and practice are clearly different. Some people, academics are able to kind of buck the trend here, but for the mass majority of things, you need someone that has done it themselves, especially when it comes to the topic of money. And then ideally, okay, you might know how to do it yourself, but do you know how to help other people do it? Because that's a different skill, right? Because you might just tell them to do what you're doing. Just like the fitness influencers say, hey, just do X, Y, and Z, not really quite realizing that, you just have completely different genetics to this other person, right? You just built different. So actually what you're telling them is wrong. Yeah. I'll give you an example of this, right? Like even for me, I'm like an expert in this area. I was watching a lot of YouTube videos on this area, as you do. And after a while, I was thinking, this some of these things what they're saying, just like I just don't agree with. Like it's just wrong. And then I would look into the background of this person, and I was like, this guy is not financially successful. He's not got any money, or not very much. Or if he does, he's made the money from YouTube videos, not from what he's saying. And this is one of the biggest problems at the moment, where what does well is what people watch, as an example on YouTube. And what people watch is stuff that's entertaining, that's gripping, that hooks you in, right? That's compelling, that resonates more with you, whatever, right? Not necessarily what is most effective. That one is much more covert, right? Because the other one that you have is someone telling you to do something, but it's actually not for your benefit, it's for theirs. Yeah. So they're just telling you something because if you believe X, Y, or Z, you're more likely to then buy their course, for example, or buy someone else's course and make a commission. This is extremely important to master because the most effective way to do well in life is to find someone who has already achieved what you want from life and then be like, yo, how do I do it? Basically. But they also need to be able to effectively communicate that to you and understand what is relevant to you. Not everyone can do that. Yeah. And this is really the difference between effective teaching or education and ineffective education.
Beautiful, James. Beautiful. Thank you so much. How do you find living in Barcelona? What's it like? And do you speak Spanish?
I speak basic Spanish and I will always speak Spanish first. I think it's always really important, certainly when you live somewhere. But yes, there very quickly comes to a point where I need to switch to English. I love it here. Absolutely love it. It's such an incredible place. Um, it is a very common topic that people talk about in Barcelona, is how good Barcelona is. And it almost becomes kind of annoying, how to people talk about it. But it's true. Like it's quite hard to think of something it doesn't have. So you've got the weather, you're by the beach, it's sunny and blue sky all year round. The Spanish culture is amazing, so chill, so friendly, so open, so liberal. Food is amazing. It's more affordable than where I was living before, which was London. It's not the cheapest place to live, but it's certainly cheaper than other places. It's really international, and people are very intentional about moving here. So all of my friends here, they're all just such amazing people that in Barcelona attracts this interesting combination of people who are successful or are striving for success in whatever that is for them. while also wanting a deep desire for a really good quality of life. And that's what attracts me. You've got really interesting, inspiring people that also really take very seriously how they live their life. People are constantly exercising, socializing, going out, you know, um, enjoying life, not just trying to, make more money or be more successful. And it's in Europe. It's got a great airport. It's very easy to get around to other places in the world. I love it. I'm converted.
It sounds good. Being somewhere was warm. I'm thinking a little bit about Brexit and what kind of problems come up here, but anyway,
Yeah.
just to remind me about your Instagram presence and remind people the communities you're involved in. Give us some of the names and how people can follow those. And
Just follow me on Instagram, james.ukl. Say
fantastic.
hi. I'm on everything else. I'm just not active there. There'll be a load of content there if you want to check it out. But if you want to kind of see things on an ongoing basis and have an opportunity to communicate with me directly, that would be Instagram.
Yeah. And the communities you're involved in and building, which are
Yeah,
they?
Rise Retreats. Yeah. There's videos on there on my Instagram, uh, giving a little snapshot into some of the previous retreats we've run. So feel free to check them out.
And what do you love most about doing the retreats? What's the
The things that juice me the most is one, helping people, inspiring people. Like I problem solve, like I genuinely just when I meet someone, I'm fascinated by people, and I immediately I'm trying to work them out and who they are and how do I make their life better? And it sounds really cheesy, but like it's very rewarding doing that. Um, so. But also, there's lots of other things I care about. And the reason I run retreats is because it fundamentally gets a lot of things achieved at the same time. So I'm able to create a space where people are learning all this incredible content and education to improve their lives, right? But also, I'm connecting on a deep level with people I already know that live all around the world. So I often don't see them. There's new people that often come, so I get to meet and connect with new people in a deeper way. We do fun, cool activities. We jet ski, we skydive, we do sauna, cold plunge, surf, whatever, right? So we do cool, fun stuff. I get to teach other people. I get to learn from other people. It's very community led. Other people are running workshops and sharing what they care about and what they're an expert in, all in a few days. I mean, I can't think of any other time in my life where I'm getting that much bang for my buck.
right?
So that's why I continue to do it.
Sounds absolutely wonderful. Thank you so much for being part of this education on this podcast of educating people how to identify, design, and live their ideal lifestyle. Thank you. Now I need to go and do the homework, control that urge to spend. I did, after our last podcast, I did start having these authentic and vulnerable conversations about money with people around me. And I definitely realized that money is something that's an energy in everybody's life, and a lot of people have struggles around it. So thank you for helping us, James. And I'd love to be as confident around the topic as you are, but I suppose there is a very simple truth. So there's if you just spend money, if you just spend money, I don't know, Freudian slip, if you spend time doing something, you will be better at it. And
So
if you avoid it, you're not going to be better at it, are you?
yeah, just remember, like I often get, oh yeah, but I'm just not good at this. I find it really hard. And I'm like, yeah, I see that. It doesn't change the reality though. There are things in my life I really struggle with. But it doesn't change the reality that if I want to stop that thing being a blocker in my life, I need to accept that, yeah, in that particular area, it's going to be harder for me than maybe other people or other areas of my life. And that's okay. It's the cards we were dealt, right?
Indeed, yeah, yeah, indeed. Yeah, like Shirley J. Whitehead, my dating and relationship coach, she says it's about skills, and you need to learn skills to master anything. You need to learn work for skills and experience and learn to spot opportunities. Thank you so much, James. It's been absolutely wonderful. And I hope to see you again. It'd be lovely to come to on one of your retreats, and it'd definitely be lovely to go somewhere warm. Thank you, James.
Thank you, Sven. Love the chat as always, and looking forward to another one in the not too distant future.
Actually, I never do this, but please like, share, and subscribe. And if you find this interesting, then please do comment and look for James' podcast, The Money Paradox. You can learn so much. I have actually hyper focused a bit, and I do watch, and there's a lot to get. Thank you so much, James.